What's up, guys? Multiplier here. What we're doing today is just kind of running you through some of the basics on how to map your MIDI fighter with Traktor. It doesn't matter what MIDI fighter you have, the basics are all kind of the same. And what I'll just give you a very quick introduction, just so you know enough to really start experimenting yourself. And then once you start experimenting, you can learn some of the more advanced things. Because there's definitely some weird nuances and idiosyncrasies with Traktor that are a bit fiddly to get your head around because they're just not really that logical, but it's not too difficult just to kind of start making your own basic mapping. So step 1, buy MIDI fighter. Step 2, plug it in. Step 3, open up Traktor and then open up the preferences. And then what you do all your mapping in is the controller manager down here. So click controller manager, and then the first time you plug it in, you need to set up a new device here. So if you click device, you can see all the different almost like controllers, all the different devices that you've got mappings for. So I've already got one mapping set up, as you can see here, for my current work in progress that I've been kind of setting up for the last week or so, off and on. But when you let's set up like a new mapping just to show you the process. We go to add, generic MIDI, and then we make sure we choose the import to be your MIDI fighter, your output to be your MIDI fighter. That way this mapping knows to only consider MIDI signals from this device and kind of vice versa for outputs. So as you can kind of see down here, you've got a whole bunch of settings. You don't need to know what all the little buttons and words mean right at the kind of start, but just kind of learn what each one does one by one, and it's not too difficult really. So let's give you an example. Right, so we've got a remix deck over here, and we've got a little hi-hat in the first kind of cell. So what we want to do is, in one of my empty banks on my current mapping, say the fourth one, in fact that is the only empty one, let's map this button up here to trigger that kind of one shot in that remix deck. So we'll go to add in for add input, and then we'll go to remix deck, direct mapping, and slot 1, cell 1 trigger. Some of the times you won't really know which one is the right one, so sometimes you just got to give it a go and see what happens. So, yep. And then basically just go through this section down here and just see what seems logical. So for assignment, it's going to be remix deck D. That way it's definitely only going to consider this remix deck, not potentially this remix deck on the left. And then to tell this mapping we want this button to trigger it, 2 ways of doing it. One way is you can click this button here and then choose what channel and choose what CC or note or whatever you want to trigger it. So you can look it up in the manual to see exactly what note that is triggering. But an easier way is just to hit learn, hit the button, boom, it finds it for you straight away. So now we know that that button, oh, see, it already works. That button triggers that. And then it's also a good idea to run through these settings down here, like button, hold, just to make sure that they seem logical. So let's give you another example. So let's say we wanted to have this button down here turn on the delay. So let's go to add in, effects unit, and then it'll be probably a unit on. Cool, and then assignment, effects unit 2, and then a learn, hit that button. So now, when we hold it, if you kind of look at the mouse now, it's kind of holding the unit on. But maybe we wanted to toggle, and that's when these other settings can be useful. So interaction mode, toggle. Now it toggles it off and on. Direct is basically when it sets it at an exact value. So you could turn it to say 0 is off or 1 turns it on. So if I turn this off, I press it, always turns it on, or we can have it to say always turn it off. Pretty cool. So you can see how very quickly you can start to come up with quite cool mappings and cool ideas. I'd say that's pretty much all the basics you need to know, to be honest. If I'm going to give you one more kind of example in terms of things you can do, it would be to very, very, very quickly explain what the modifier conditions do. So modifiers are almost like shift keys. So a standard example might be you kind of hold one button and then press a button, and that's almost like holding the shift key on a computer. So you can have one button do one thing normally, but do something else kind of once the shift button is held down. So I might as well show you that very quickly just to kind of give you an idea of how simple even modifiers, which can sound quite confusing, can be to actually implement. So let's have this, what's it called? Delay set to hold. So now when we press this on, it's basically when we have it held down, it's turning the delay unit on. But let's have it so when we hold this button down as a shift key, this does something else. So let's have it, just for sake of argument, have it turn the SPR button, whatever the hell that is. Have it turn that on. So let's add in the modifier. So add in the modifier and have it modifier 1. So modifier, the state is by default on 0. So we'll do learn this one because we want this to be our modifier key, or like the shift key. And then we'll do type of controller. So we need it to be a button, and then interaction mode hold, so that when we hold it down, it changes the modifier state from 0 and then set it to 1. So now it was quite useful. If you look at modifier state up here, you can see what state each of the 8 modifiers is in. So now when I hold down this button, which is like our shift key, our modifier, it changes the 1 from 0, or change the modifier 1 from 0, which is the default, to 1. So now whenever I hold this, modifier 1 goes to 1. Cool. So what we do now is, for that button that turns the delay on, let's set a condition just to make 100% sure it's only going to turn the delay on when the modifier of 1 is in state 0. So M1 for modifier 1, under modifier conditions here, set to value 0. It still works. So now let's add in, because remember what we want is when we hold down this button and then press this one, it basically turns on this other button up here, the SPR. So add in effects unit button 3, which is that SPR, it's the third button in this effects unit. Assignment effects unit 2. Modify conditions, M1 is set to value 1, so only when that button is held down, remember. And then if we do learn this one, and then button hold, yep. So now, when we hold this, without this button, turns on the delay, just as we expect. But now when we hold this and press this one, it's turning the SPR on. So as you can see, reasonably useless example in the real world, but it just demonstrates how quick and easy it is to actually use even some of the more advanced mapping things like modifiers. And yeah, I'll leave it there, because otherwise you're going to get a bit too complex. But have a go. The only way to really get a feel for this mapping thing is just to give it a go and start simple. Have an idea for a mapping, but don't try and overcomplicate things at first. Start simple, just get one thing working, try it. Once it's definitely working, add another cool thing. Try it, make sure it's working, add another cool thing. That way, you're also not going to forget what each button does. If you map like a whole mapping in one go without trying it out, you're not going to remember what all your different weird shift keys do, and all your different banks and your different modes and all that kind of cool stuff. But yeah, that's it. Mapping basics with multiplier. Done. Now I'm going to do another video where I explain how to map the output of MIDI fighters, like the colors with the Traktor words, because that's a bit more confusing. Coolness in the brain. Video done. Right, how do I stop this?